The ships came on a Tuesday morning. Sarah was walking her dog in Central Park when the sky turned dark. She looked up, expecting clouds, but instead saw metal. Huge pieces of metal that blocked out the sun. Ships, thousands of them. They stretched from one end of the sky to the other, and they made no sound at all. Her dog started to whine. Sarah could not move. She just stood there like millions of other people all over the world and watched the end of everything she knew. The Dominion had arrived. They did not attack right away. That was not their way. They believed in proper conquest. They believed in rules. They had destroyed 11 species across the galaxy, and they had done it the correct way every single time. First, you showed your power. Then you gave the weak ones a chance to surrender. Then if they were foolish enough to fight, you crushed them. Simple, clean, honorable. Ambassador came down to Earth 3 days after the ships arrived. He was not like anything humans had ever seen. His body was made of something like crystal, and light moved through him in strange patterns. He was tall, almost 9 feet, and when he walked, he made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The United Nations gathered to meet him. Every leader, every general, every important person on Earth sat in that room and waited. They had prepared speeches. They had prepared questions. They had prepared to negotiate. Did not let them speak. He stood at the center of the great hall, and the light inside his body flickered in patterns that somehow translated into human language. The technology behind this was beyond anything Earth scientists could understand, but the words were clear enough. "You are the species called humans," said. "We have watched you for some time. We have studied your history, your wars, your science. We have measured your weapons and counted your ships." He paused. The patterns in his body shifted, and somehow everyone in the room knew he was laughing. "You are adorable." No one moved. No one breathed. "Soft bodies that break so easily," continued. "Lives that last less than a single rotation of your star. You fight your wars with chemical explosions and sharpened metal. Your greatest ships cannot even leave your own star system." The laughter patterns grew stronger. "Our children play with more dangerous toys." President Williams stood up. He was a tall man, strong, a former soldier. His voice did not shake when he spoke. "We are willing to discuss peace. We are willing to." "Peace?" His body flared with light. "Little creature, you do not understand. We do not discuss. We do not negotiate. The Dominion has conquered 11 species. We have rules. We have traditions. We give you a choice because that is proper." He moved closer to the human leaders, and several of them stepped back without meaning to. "Choice 1, you surrender completely, without conditions. Your planet becomes part of the Dominion. Your people become servants. Your resources become ours. In return, we let you live. Some of you, at least, the useful ones." The room was silent. "Choice 2, you fight. You resist. You cling to your little pride and your little weapons." The laughter came again. "And we remove you from existence. Every city, every person, every memory. We will burn your world until nothing remains but glass and ash. And then we will use that glass to build monuments to our victory." President Williams' hands were shaking now, but his voice was still steady. "And if we choose to fight, you'll just destroy us all." "Of course not," said. "That would be wasteful. First, we will land our soldiers. We will give you the honor of combat, our warriors against yours on the ground face to face. This is the proper way. When you lose, and you will lose, then we will destroy what remains, but we will give you the chance to die with some small dignity." He turned to leave, then stopped. "You have 7 of your days to decide. 7 days to look at your children and choose if they will live as servants or die as ashes. I suggest you choose wisely." And then he was gone. The crystal body dissolved into light, and the light rose up through the ceiling, through the sky, back to the waiting ships. The world went mad after that. Some people screamed for surrender. They said there was no point in fighting, that humanity should accept its place and survive however it could. Others screamed for war. They said that freedom was worth dying for, that humanity had never bowed to tyrants and would not start now. The armies of Earth gathered. The generals met and made their plans. They looked at what they had, tanks and planes and ships and nuclear weapons, and they looked at what they had and they knew the truth. They could not win. Not in a fair fight. Not ship against ship, army against army. The technology was thousands of years beyond anything Earth had. Their shields could stop nuclear missiles. Their weapons could level cities from orbit. Their soldiers were giants in armor that human bullets could not scratch. It was impossible, everyone knew it. But something strange happened in those 7 days. Something they did not expect. Something the Galactic Council, watching from far away, had never seen before. Humanity did not argue about whether to fight. They argued about how. In a small room in the Pentagon, an old general named looked at the reports and smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf seeing sheep. "They think we're going to fight fair," she said. "They think we're going to line up our soldiers and march them into battle like good little primitives." Her aide, a young captain named Tors, looked at her with confusion. "Ma'am, what else can we do?" Pulled up a file on her computer. It showed pictures of mud and trenches and barbed wire. It showed jungles full of hidden traps. It showed cities reduced to rubble, with fighters hiding in every shadow. "They have rules," she said. "Honor, tradition. They fight the same way every time because that's how civilized species fight." She looked at Tors with eyes that had seen too much war. "We're not civilized. We never have been. We crawled out of the mud and killed everything that tried to stop us. We invented 100 different ways to destroy each other. And now," she closed the file, "now we're going to show these crystal bastards what humans really are." The 7 days passed. Earth's response to the ultimatum was not surrender. It was silence. And in that silence, something was growing. Something old and dark and patient. Something that had been sleeping in the human heart since the first caveman picked up a rock and realized it could crack a skull. The wanted war. They had no idea what they were asking for. General had fought in 3 wars before the aliens came. She had seen friends die in the sand. She had given orders that killed people. She had learned, over 40 years of service, one simple truth about warfare. The side that follows the rules usually loses. Now she stood in front of the largest military gathering in human history. Every nation had sent its best commanders. American generals sat next to Russian admirals. Chinese strategists shared tables with European officers. Old enemies had become allies overnight because they had given humanity something it had never had before. A common enemy. "Let me tell you what they expect," said. Her voice was calm, almost soft. The room was silent. "They expect us to gather our armies. They expect us to meet them on open ground. They expect us to fight with honor, with formations, with the proper rules of war." She pressed a button and a hologram appeared above the table. It showed a soldier, 8 feet tall, crystal body covered in some kind of energy shield, weapons built into its arms that could melt steel. "One of these soldiers is worth 100 of ours in a straight fight," continued. "Their shields can stop our bullets. Their armor can survive our bombs. If we fight them the way they want us to fight, we will die, all of us. Every soldier, every civilian, every child." She let that sink in. "So we're not going to fight them that way." A Russian general, a big man named, leaned forward. "What other way is there?" Smiled. It was not a comforting expression. "General, you are Russian. Your ancestors stopped Napoleon. They stopped. Do you know how they did it?" Nodded slowly. "They did not fight fair. They burned their own cities. They hid in the winter. They made the enemy fight the land itself." "Exactly," changed the hologram. Now it showed something different: tunnels, hidden camps, weapons made from farming tools. "They have conquered 11 species. Every single time those species tried to fight back with their best technology, fleet against fleet, army against army, and every single time they lost. She looked around the room. We're not going to use our best technology. We're going to use our worst. We're going to fight like our ancestors fought, with dirt and blood and tricks that would make the devil himself feel sick. A Chinese general named Wei spoke up. You want us to abandon our cities, our weapons. I want us to survive, said. Our cities are targets. Our military bases are targets. Everything the enemy can see from space is a target. So we're going to empty the targets. We're going to scatter our people into the mountains, the forests, the caves, the sewers. We're going to become invisible. And then, Wei asked, and then we're going to make them bleed. Not with one big battle, but with 1,000 small cuts. Every patrol they send out will lose soldiers. Every supply line they build will be destroyed. Every camp they make will burn in the night. We won't give them the war they want. We'll give them the war we're good at. She pulled up more images. Vietnam, Afghanistan, the French resistance, the guerrilla fighters of 100 different conflicts. Humans have been fighting like this for thousands of years. We invented it. We perfected it. And now we're going to use it against an enemy that has never seen anything like it. An American admiral, a woman named Jackson, spoke carefully. General, with respect, this sounds like we're planning to lose slowly instead of losing quickly. Nodded, maybe, but losing slowly gives us something losing quickly doesn't. Time to learn, time to adapt, time to find weaknesses they don't even know they have. She paused. And there's something else, something the history books don't talk about much. What's that? Guerrilla wars break armies, not just physically but mentally. You can't fight an enemy you can't see. You can't win against people who won't stay dead. They think this will be easy. They think we'll break in a few weeks. Her smile grew colder. They have no idea what we're capable of when we're desperate. The planning took 3 days. 3 days of arguments, calculations, and hard choices. The evacuation orders went out on day 4. It was the largest movement of people in human history. Billions of humans leaving their homes, carrying only what they could hold. They went into the wilderness. They went underground. They went anywhere the alien sensors might not find them. Some refused to leave. Old people who had lived in their homes for decades. Stubborn people who believed the government was overreacting. They stayed in the empty cities and waited. They would be the first to die. While the civilians scattered, the military was doing something else. They were hiding weapons. Not the big ones, not the missiles and tanks that they could track from orbit. Small weapons. Simple weapons. Explosives made from fertilizer and fuel. Guns buried in waterproof cases. Knives and spears and crossbows that didn't show up on energy sensors. They were also training. Not the usual training, not formations and marching and military protocol. This was different. This was how to move without being seen, how to wait for hours without moving, how to kill someone silently with nothing but your hands and a piece of wire, how to make a bomb from household chemicals, how to disappear into a crowd, into a forest, into the earth itself. The children learned too. That was the hardest part, teaching children to fight, teaching them to hate, but the officers understood something that didn't. Humans weren't just soldiers. Every single one of them, from the oldest grandmother to the youngest child, was a potential fighter. All they needed was a reason. The had given them that reason. On day 7, Ambassador appeared again. His crystal body shimmered as he addressed the empty United Nations building. His message was broadcast to every screen on Earth. Your time has ended, he said. We have seen no surrender. We have heard no answer. This is disappointing but not surprising. Primitive species often choose pride over survival. He paused, and the patterns of light in his body shifted to something like satisfaction. Our ground forces will begin landing tomorrow. We will occupy your cities. We will subdue your resistance. And when it is over, We will show the galaxy what happens to species that refuse the Dominion's mercy." The broadcast ended. In a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, General watched the message with her command staff. When it was done, she turned to them. "They're going to land in the cities," she said. "The empty cities. They're going to walk into our homes and find nothing but dust and silence." Captain Torres looked at her, and then looked at the map on the wall. It showed Earth, but different. Instead of nations, it showed zones. Red zones where the enemy would land. Blue zones where human forces were hidden. Yellow zones that were rigged with enough explosives to level mountains. "And then," she said quietly, "we teach them what fear feels like." The first entered Earth's atmosphere the next morning. They found the cities empty. They found the military bases abandoned. They found a planet that seemed to have simply given up. Commander Eth, leader of the ground forces, reported to with confusion in his voice. "They have fled, scattered like animals. There is no organized resistance." "Then find them," replied. "Hunt them down, show them that running is pointless." Eth assembled his patrols and sent them into the wilderness. In the mountains and forests and caves of Earth, millions of eyes watched them come. Millions of hands held weapons. Millions of hearts beat with cold, patient hatred. The trap was set. Now all they had to do was wait. Henry Dawson was 73 years old. He had been a farmer all his life. His hands were rough from work, his back was bent from years of labor, and his eyes were starting to fail him. He was not a soldier. He had never killed anyone. He had never even been in a real fight. But Henry Dawson knew how to wait. He lay in the tall grass on the hill above his farm, binoculars pressed to his eyes. He had been there for 16 hours. He had not moved. He had not eaten. He had barely breathed. His body screamed at him to get up, to stretch, to do anything except lie there in the cold mud. He ignored it. Below him, a patrol of soldiers moved through his fields. There were 6 of them, tall crystal beings that glowed with inner light. They walked through his corn like it was nothing, their energy shields pushing the stalks aside. They didn't care about his crops. They didn't care about his farm. They were looking for humans. Henry watched them. He memorized how they moved. He counted their steps. He noted which one seemed to be the leader, which ones looked around more carefully, which ones seemed bored or tired. When the patrol finally left, he waited another 2 hours, just to be sure. Then he crawled backward, slowly, carefully, until he was behind the hill and out of sight. Only then did he stand up. His legs almost collapsed. His back felt like it was made of broken glass. He didn't care. He had information now. He knew how the enemy moved, how fast they walked, how often they stopped to check their surroundings. He would pass this information along, and someone smarter than him would figure out how to use it. That was how the resistance worked. Everyone had a job. Everyone contributed something, even old farmers who could barely see. 3,000 miles away, in the tunnels beneath Tokyo, a 16-year-old girl named was doing a different kind of watching. They had set up a base in the center of the city, a big base with hundreds of soldiers and dozens of ships. They thought they were safe there, surrounded by their technology and their shields. Knew better. She had grown up in these tunnels. Tokyo's underground was a maze of subway lines, sewer systems, and old wartime bunkers that went back almost 100 years. The sensors couldn't see through all that concrete and steel. Down here, humans were invisible. For the past 3 weeks had been mapping the enemy base. She would sneak up through service tunnels, peek through drainage grates, and watch. She wrote everything down in a small notebook: patrol schedules, guard positions, which doors opened how and when, where the supplies were stored, where the commanders gathered. It was boring work, dangerous work. Twice she had almost been caught, and she had to lie perfectly still while alien soldiers walked past close enough to touch. But she never complained. She never asked to stop, because she understood something that the didn't. Information was a weapon, maybe the most powerful weapon of all. In the Sahara Desert, a group of Bedouin trackers followed a supply convoy across the sand. They stayed far behind, moving only at night, hiding under brown cloaks that made them invisible against the dunes. They had technology that could spot a mouse from orbit, but they didn't know how to look for humans who moved like ghosts, who knew the desert like they knew their own bodies, who had been surviving in this harsh land for thousands of years. The trackers watched the convoy for 8 days. They mapped every route. They identified every weakness. They found the places where the shields flickered, where the sensors had blind spots, where the alien machines struggled against the ancient enemy of heat and sand. When they were done, they sent their information back through a chain of messengers. Word of mouth, paper notes, methods so old and simple that no alien technology could intercept them. This was happening everywhere. In the forests of the Amazon, indigenous hunters tracked patrols with skills passed down for generations. In the mountains of Afghanistan, guerrilla fighters who had spent decades fighting invaders now had a new enemy to study. In the flooded streets of Venice, resistance members used boats and bridges to watch alien movements while staying hidden in the ancient city's endless hiding places. The thought they were hunting humans. They didn't realize they were being watched by millions of eyes. Commander Eth was getting frustrated. 3 weeks since the landing and they had found almost nothing. A few stragglers, some old people who had refused to evacuate, some sick or injured who couldn't travel. But the main population, the military forces, the government leaders, gone. How is this possible? He demanded in a meeting with his officers. We have scanned every inch of this planet. We have sensors that can detect a heartbeat from space. Where are they hiding? No one had an answer. The truth was something they couldn't understand. Their technology was designed to find technology, energy signatures, electronic signals, heat sources, the things that advanced species used. But humans weren't acting like an advanced species anymore. They had abandoned their technology. They were using fires that looked like natural phenomena, communications that used nothing but human voices and written notes, transportation that relied on feet and horses and boats. They had gone backward in time, and the sensors couldn't follow them. Meanwhile, something else was happening, something quiet, something careful. Weapons were being moved. In barns and basements and caves all over the world, humans were preparing their arsenal. Not the big weapons, the ones they would see coming. Small things, personal things, hunting rifles that had been in families for generations, kitchen knives sharpened to razor edges, explosives made from fertilizer and fuel oil, following recipes that had been shared 1 billion times in the first week of the occupation. They had shields that could stop bullets, but could they stop a homemade bomb buried under the road? Could they stop a poison slipped into their water supply? Could they stop a sniper firing from 3 kilometers away, hidden so well that their sensors couldn't find him? No one knew yet, but they were about to find out. On the night before the first attack, General sent out a message. It was short, broadcast through the hidden networks that now connected the human resistance. Tomorrow we stop watching. Tomorrow we start fighting. Remember, we don't need to win. We just need to make them bleed. Every soldier they lose is a soldier they can't replace. Every supply convoy we destroy is food and ammunition they don't have. Every night they can't sleep is a night their minds get weaker. She paused. They came here thinking we were primitives, animals, prey. Tomorrow we show them what prey looks like when it bites back. Tomorrow we remind them that humans aren't just survivors, we're predators, the most dangerous predators this galaxy has ever seen. Good luck, stay alive, and make them pay for every inch of our world. That night billions of humans lay awake in their hidden camps. They checked their weapons. They reviewed their plans. They thought about their families, their homes, the lives they had lost. And they waited. They slept peacefully in their occupied cities, confident in their technology, certain of their victory. They had no idea what was coming. At 3:00 a.m., in 100 different time zones all across the planet, the first explosions lit up the night. The war had begun, and humanity was done watching. The bridge collapsed at exactly 3:07 a.m. A convoy was crossing it when the charges went off. The explosives had been placed 3 weeks ago, hidden inside the concrete by construction workers who had built the bridge 20 years before. They knew every crack, every weakness, every place where a small bomb could do the most damage. The first 3 vehicles made it across. The fourth one didn't. The crystal soldiers inside fell 30 meters into the river below. Their shields protected them from bullets and energy weapons, but they didn't protect them from drowning. They didn't breathe air, but they needed something, some gas from their home world, and the river didn't have it. It took them 15 minutes to die. Watching from the hills, a group of resistance fighters marked the time. 15 minutes. That was useful information. That meant that water could be a weapon. Everything could be a weapon now. In Tokyo, weeks of watching finally paid off. She led a team of 20 fighters through the tunnels she had mapped, up through a drainage grate that opened directly beneath the supply depot. The guards never saw them coming. The fighters came out of the ground like ghosts, moving in perfect silence, carrying nothing but knives and homemade explosives. The shields could stop bullets, but they took a moment to activate. 1 moment was enough. The first guard died before he could react. A knife across the throat, or whatever passed for a throat on those crystal bodies. The others turned at the sound of their comrade falling, and that was when the explosives went off. The supply depot burned for 3 days. Food, ammunition, medical supplies all gone. The soldiers in Tokyo would have to wait for resupply from orbit. And while they waited, they would be hungry. They would be weak. That was the plan. Not one big victory, but 1,000 small ones. Death by 1,000 cuts. Commander Eth received the reports with growing disbelief. Attacks were happening everywhere. Convoys destroyed. Patrols ambushed. Supply lines cut. In a single night, he had lost more soldiers than in the entire landing operation. "This is impossible," he said. "They are primitives. They don't have the technology for this." His second-in-command, a younger officer named X, looked at the data with worried eyes. "They don't need technology, Commander. They're using simple things. Chemicals mixed together to make explosions. Metal sharpened into blades. Holes dug in the ground to trap our vehicles." Holes in the ground. Eth couldn't believe what he was hearing. "We are the Dominion. We have conquered 11 species. We do not lose soldiers to holes in the ground." But they did. In the mountains of Afghanistan, a patrol walked into a valley that looked empty. The rocks were just rocks. The sand was just sand. There was nothing on their sensors, nothing to suggest danger. The first soldier fell into a pit covered with thin fabric and dust. At the bottom of the pit were metal spikes, each one covered in something that made the crystalline structure crack and crumble. Poison. The humans had found something toxic to the invaders, and they had coated their weapons with it. The other soldiers tried to help their fallen comrade. That was when the shooting started. The bullets couldn't penetrate their shields, but the shields made them glow, made them visible, made them targets. The humans shot at their feet, at the ground around them, kicking up dust and debris. They couldn't see. They couldn't run. They were blind and afraid in a land that seemed to hate them. One by one, they fell into other pits, other traps. The humans had spent weeks preparing this valley, turning every meter of ground into a death zone. When it was over, 12 soldiers were dead. The humans had lost no one. The resistance learned and adapted with terrifying speed. They discovered that they communicated through patterns of light in their bodies. So they built decoys, simple machines with lights that flashed in patterns that looked like distress signals. Patrols would rush to help their comrades and find only empty ground and waiting ambushes. They discovered that the shields could stop fast-moving projectiles but struggled with slow-moving ones. So they built crossbows and slingshots, weapons that fired heavy objects at speeds just below the shield threshold. A rock might not kill a soldier, but it could knock him down. And once he was down, other methods could finish the job. They discovered that they needed to sleep, and that their sleep was deep and hard to wake from. So they learned to attack at night, in the hours when the alien metabolism was slowest. They would crawl into enemy camps on their bellies, moving inch by inch, and kill the sleepers without making a sound. The children were the best at this, small enough to fit through spaces adults couldn't, light enough to move without making noise, and filled with a cold hatred that made them fearless. Eth tried to fight back. He ordered his troops to stay in fortified bases, to never travel alone, to trust nothing and no one. But that just made things worse. The humans adapted again. If the wouldn't come out, then the humans would go in. Suicide bombers walked into checkpoints with explosives hidden in their clothes, in their bodies, in their very bones. Poisoned food was left where patrols would find it. Snipers fired single shots from impossible distances, then disappeared before anyone could trace them. And always the information kept flowing. Every attack taught the humans something new. Every dead soldier was studied, examined, taken apart to find weaknesses. Within a month, the resistance had a complete picture of biology. They knew what was poison to them, what frequencies hurt their senses, what temperatures made their crystalline bodies crack. They used all of it. 3 months after the invasion began, Eth sent a desperate message to Ambassador. "We cannot hold this planet. The population is gone, scattered into wilderness we cannot search. Every time we find them, they disappear again. They attack us from nowhere, kill our soldiers with tools we don't understand, and vanish before we can respond." He paused, and something in his light patterns looked almost broken. "This is not warfare, Ambassador. This is extermination. They are hunting us like animals. Our soldiers are afraid to sleep, afraid to eat, afraid to walk outside the bases. Morale is collapsing. We have lost 40% of our ground forces, and we have not found or destroyed a single significant human military target." Received the message with growing concern. This was not supposed to happen. The humans were supposed to break. Every species broke eventually. That was the way of things. "Continue the operation," he ordered. "Request reinforcements from the fleet. Increase orbital bombardment of suspected human positions." But the bombardment hit nothing. The humans had learned to read the attack patterns. They moved constantly, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. The bombs fell on empty forest and abandoned caves. And still the attacks continued. Every day, every night, endless, relentless, without mercy or pause. In a bunker somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, General reviewed the latest reports with something that might have been hope. "They're breaking," she said. "It's slow, but it's happening. Their soldiers are making mistakes. Their patrols are getting sloppy. They're scared." Captain Torres nodded. "But how long can we keep this up? We've lost people too, good people." "I know." His voice was heavy with grief. She had sent thousands to their deaths. She would send thousands more before this was over. "But we're not trying to win. We're trying to survive. As long as we're still fighting, still hurting them, still costing them soldiers and supplies, we're winning." She looked at the map, at all the places where human fighters were hiding, waiting, planning their next attack. "They came here thinking we would be easy prey. They thought a few weeks would be enough to break us." She smiled, and there was something fierce and proud in it. "They have no idea what they're dealing with. We're humanity. We've been fighting each other for 100,000 years. We invented every dirty trick in the book, and a few that aren't in any book." She turned to her staff. "Keep fighting, keep hurting them, and eventually they'll realize the truth." "What truth?" Torres asked. looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death, and still refused to give up. That some prey fights back. 6 months after the invasion began, Ambassador stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at Earth. The planet was still beautiful. Blue oceans, green forests, white clouds. From up here you couldn't see the war. You couldn't see the burned cities, the mass graves, the endless fighting. It all looked so peaceful. It was a lie. Down there his army was dying. Not in one great battle, not in a glorious defeat that songs would be written about. They were dying in darkness and mud, killed by primitives with Stone Age weapons and tactics that made no sense. His soldiers were afraid to leave their bases. His supply lines were under constant attack. His commanders were begging for permission to retreat. 60% of his ground forces were gone, dead or wounded or simply missing, vanished into a planet that seemed determined to swallow them whole. The reinforcements he had requested were not coming. The Dominion Council had looked at the casualty reports and decided that Earth was not worth the cost. They had conquered 11 species with barely any losses. This one small planet had cost them more soldiers than all the others combined. Felt something he had never felt before. Something cold and terrible that crawled through his crystalline body like a crack spreading through glass. Fear. He was afraid of these creatures, these soft, short-lived beings who should have surrendered on the first day. They didn't fight like any species he had ever encountered. They didn't have honor. They didn't have rules. They just kept coming, kept fighting, kept dying and killing in equal measure. And they were getting better at it. In the beginning, the human attacks had been clumsy, poorly planned, often suicidal. But they learned. Every battle taught them something new. Every dead soldier was studied and examined and used to make the next attack more effective. Now they were capturing ships, not the big ones, not the warships that hung in orbit, small ones, transports and scouts and supply vessels. The humans would ambush the crews, kill them with their primitive weapons, and then learn. That was the terrifying part. They learned so fast. Within weeks of capturing their first ship, humans were flying it. Within months, they had figured out the weapon systems. Now there were reports of human pilots attacking patrols from the air, using stolen craft with stolen weapons. A species that couldn't even leave their own star system was now flying alien ships and winning. It was impossible. It was against everything they believed about the universe. Advanced species conquered primitive ones. That was the natural order. That was how it had always been. But humanity didn't care about the natural order. Commander Eth's final message arrived on a cold morning, 6 months and 3 days after the invasion began. Ambassador, I am requesting immediate evacuation of all remaining ground forces. We cannot hold our positions. We cannot advance. We cannot even retreat safely because every road and path is watched by human fighters. His voice was broken, exhausted, nothing like the confident officer who had landed on Earth expecting easy victory. They know us now. They know our weaknesses, our schedules, our patrol routes. They know what hurts us and what kills us. They have turned their entire planet into a weapon, and every day they get better at using it. There was a long pause. I have lost soldiers to children, Ambassador. Children who crawled through tunnels too small for our bodies, who carried bombs strapped to their chests, who died with smiles on their faces because they knew their deaths would cost us more than we could afford to pay. Another pause. When Eth spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. This is not a species we can conquer. This is not a war we can win. Every day we stay here, we lose more soldiers to an enemy that does not stop, does not sleep, does not surrender. They have no fear of death. They fight like they have nothing to lose and everything to gain. We came here to show them the power of the Dominion. Instead, they have shown us something we never wanted to learn. His final words were the ones that would be repeated across the galaxy for centuries to come. We thought we were predators, ambassador. We were wrong. We found something on this planet that makes predators look tame. These humans, they are survivors, the most dangerous kind, the kind that would rather die than give up, the kind that will fight to the last breath, the last bullet, the last drop of blood. We cannot break them. We can only leave while we still have enough soldiers to fly our ships home. Made his decision. The fleet began its withdrawal at dawn. One by one, the ships that had darkened Earth's skies lifted higher, pulled back, turned toward the stars. The ground forces, what was left of them, scrambled aboard evacuation craft under constant human attack. Even as they retreated, humans were still fighting, still killing, still refusing to let them leave peacefully. It wasn't hatred, it wasn't revenge, it was something simpler and more terrifying. It was a message, a warning to anyone who might think about trying again. Earth does not surrender, Earth does not forget, Earth fights back. 3 days after the last ship left the system, humanity sent its first official communication to the Galactic Council. General wrote it herself, sitting in the same bunker where she had planned the resistance. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from exhaustion. She had not slept properly in 6 months. She had watched thousands of people die. She had ordered attacks she knew would fail just to keep the pressure on. But they had won. Against all odds, against the most advanced military in known space, humanity had won. Her message was short. We are humanity. We come from a world that has tried to kill us since we first drew breath. Our planet has ice ages and earthquakes and hurricanes and plagues. Our animals have claws and teeth and poison. Even our own kind has spent most of our history trying to kill each other. We are not conquerors. We are not warriors. We are survivors. We have clawed our way up from mud and blood and darkness, and we have reached the stars through nothing but stubbornness and spite. They came to our world. They called us primitives. They laughed at our weakness. They gave us 7 days to surrender. We gave them 6 months of hell. Let this serve as a message to the galaxy. We do not want war. We do not seek enemies. But if anyone threatens our home, our people, our children, they will face the same thing they faced. Not an army, not a fleet, not a government or a nation. They will face a species that has spent 100,000 years learning how to kill anything that threatens us. A species that does not know how to give up. A species that will fight with rocks and sticks and bare hands if that's all we have left. They mocked mankind. Then the battlefield fell silent. And when the silence ended, it was their ships that were retreating, their soldiers that were broken, their dominion that had learned, for the first time in its history, what it feels like to lose. We are humanity, remember that. The message spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. In council chambers and war rooms and throne halls across 1,000 worlds, beings of every shape and size read the words and felt something they hadn't felt before. Respect and perhaps a little fear. The soft creatures from the third planet had done something no one thought possible. They had looked at the greatest military power in the galaxy, refused to surrender, and fought until that power gave up and went home. The Galactic Council officially recognized Earth as a sovereign world 2 weeks later. No one objected. No one suggested that perhaps humanity should be conquered while they were still weak. Because they weren't weak, they had never been weak. They had just been waiting for a reason to show their teeth. On Earth, the celebrations were quiet. There was too much grief for anything loud, too many empty seats at family tables, too many names that would never be spoken again except in memory. But there was pride too, pride in what they had done, pride in what they had survived, pride in the simple fact that humanity, against all odds, was still here. General stood at a window, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, they were licking their wounds and trying to understand what had happened. Somewhere out there, other species were reading her message and wondering what kind of creatures lived on that small blue planet. She smiled, It was a tired smile, but a real one. "Let them wonder," she said to no one in particular. "Let them all wonder, and let them remember. Humanity doesn't break, we don't surrender, we don't give up. We just survive. And sometimes, when we have to, we bite back." The stars twinkled in the darkness, and for the first time in 6 months they seemed friendly. Not a threat, not an enemy, just lights in the sky full of possibility and mystery. Humanity had survived its first contact with alien life, not with diplomacy or surrender, but with blood and fire and pure stubborn refusal to die. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't pretty, but it was human. And that, in the end, was enough.